Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of Peeping Ballers. And the day has finally come. Jurgen Klinsmann is officially out as the head coach of the South Korean men's national team. Before I start the video, I want to give a big shout out to the Korean football writers Lee Sung-mo and Kim Tae-ryung. Also, a big shout out to Steve Han as well, who've done some excellent reporting during this entire saga. And these three men were essentially critical in talking about how it was very likely that Jurgen Klinsmann was going to be fired today. For anyone that follows Korean football, I think this was obvious that it needed to happen. I'm going to be honest, when Klinsmann was first hired, I thought that there was some upside to the decision to hire him just because he had experience leading teams deep into international competitions. But unfortunately, he gave in to the worst of his qualities, one being lazy and two having absolutely no tactical plan. And I think it was very clear after this Asian Cup that this could not continue, especially going into 2026. So the correct move was made. Now, in a press conference today at the KFA house in Cheongno-gu, the head of the KFA, Chung Mong-gyu, showed his face in public for the first time in a long time. Chung Mong-gyu, guys, is not someone who likes to be out in public and giving press conferences. And you can see that he was actually very, very nervous in front of the reporters when he announced his decision to terminate Jurgen Klinsmann. He was mumbling a lot, staring down at the statement that had been prepared. And it just looked like he wasn't a man comfortable with public speaking. And that's not going to go over very well in Korea because the public is very angry and they want a lot of answers. Now, in this initial statement that he gave to reporters today, Chung Mong-gyu mentioned that there was basically a systemic management failure within the KFA to hire the right coach, but also to make sure that the harmony in the locker room was good enough to put on a great performance at the Asian Cup. Chung Mong-gyu did not say that he was going to resign. In fact, the vibe that I got from his quotes was that he is planning to run for another term as the KFA president in 2025. There's an article from Chi Ho Yu at Yonhap News. It states, quote, the next election for the KFA presidency is January 2025. Chung has been rumored to be seeking his fourth term and virtually confirmed such speculation on Friday. Chung said, quote, during our General Assembly in 2018, I changed articles of association so that a KFA president could only have 3 terms. However, the Korean Sport and Olympic Committee and the Sports Ministry did not approve of the change. I will let that answer the question about my future. Guys, to anyone who can analyze this quote, it seems like he's saying in an indirect way, oh, I know I messed up, but I'm not resigning because the law basically stipulates that I can still run for another term. And I hope that a few weeks later, after this news has blown over, the public is going to forget about how badly I erred in picking Klinsmann. Now, this is basically a theory that the excellent football writer Steve Han has told me. Steve hasn't been in the business for a long, long time, and in his opinion, Chung Mong-gyu has used Jurgen Klinsmann as the scapegoat, fired him, and is thinking to himself, okay, well, the public wanted blood. I gave them blood. Now they want my blood as well, but maybe they'll forget in a few weeks or a few months. And if we whoop on Thailand next month, a lot of people won't be calling for my resignation, or at least that's the thinking that Chung Mong-gyu is probably doing in his head. Klinsmann, yes, is a big problem in this national team, but at the end of the day, nothing really fundamentally changes unless you get rid of the person at the top, because a fish rots from the head down. There's been so much corruption, so much mismanagement, so much toxicity within this national team, despite the fact that we're producing world-class players. And it's a shame that Chung Mong-gyu is still leading this association, especially heading into a very, very important World Cup in 2026. If you guys were curious about the process of how Klinsmann was fired, Chung and his officials reviewed a recommendation that was made by the KFA's National Team Committee yesterday, which I broke down in a previous video. And that recommendation was to fire Jurgen Klinsmann based on reasons ranging from his lack of tactical preparation at the Asian Cup to his failure to run a tight ship in the locker room. But in terms of who's going to replace Jurgen Klinsmann, I don't know this for a fact, but from what I've heard and after talking to some other reporters, the KFA basically had to pay out around 5 million US dollars to get rid of Jurgen Klinsmann and his backroom staff. The thing is, he had a lot of backroom staff as well, and Jurgen was also on a very high salary. I believe Jurgen was getting paid around 2.3 million US dollars a year. So when you factor in the severance pay that you're getting, the buyout pay, whatever you want to call it, I'm not sure if the KFA now has the money left to hire a expensive foreign coach that can come in, bring some stability in, and bring their own staff and help us basically rebuild for 2026. It's looking very likely that the KFA is going to turn to a domestic Korean manager. Now, there are a few good Korean managers that are currently working in the K League. There's not a lot of them, in my opinion, but there's a few. But getting them out of contract is going to cost even more money. And the KFA season, guys, is starting in about 2 weeks or so. So I doubt that any of these teams are going to release their managers so close to the first match day. The most likely, at least interim manager, is going to be someone who has had experience with the national team setup before, but is also currently unemployed. Maybe one of the biggest names we can think of right now is Park Hang-seo, who is the former manager of the Vietnamese national team. He was a former assistant under Goose Hiddink at the 2002 World Cup. I believe Mr. Park, no longer the coach of Vietnam, but he recently last year set up a football academy in Vietnam. But other than that, I'm not sure that he has another official job. So he's one to watch out for. Another name is Hwang Sun-hong, who was the coach at the recent Asian Games. We did win gold at that Asian game. I think most people would agree that it's in spite of Hwang Sun-hong and not because of him. A lot of people don't really rate him as a manager and believe that he only got these jobs with the U23 team because he used to be a famous player. But at this moment, I think those are the two names to look out for, Park Hang-seo and Hwang Sun-hong. I could be wrong. There could be a few other guys lurking in the weeds that could take over as interims, but I think that those are the two biggest Korean names that I can think of right now, because I don't think Hong Myung-bo, who's managing Ulsan Hyundai, Kim Gi-dong, who's at FC Seoul, are going to leave their posts. One, because I think they're both getting paid very good money, and two, because they're so close to the start of the K-League season. And I don't think Hong Myung-bo wants to come back as manager of the national team. I think he had a really hard time as the coach with all the criticism that he endured, so maybe that chapter of his life is closed. Kim Gi-dong, I would like to see manage the national team, but he literally hasn't even managed a game for FC Seoul. It's a new job for him, so he will not, in my opinion, be leaving the capital city club. However, if, let's say, in a world where the KFA does have money, they can go for a foreign coach, who would I hire? Well, I've seen some people say Jose Mourinho, Jurgen Klopp. I mean, guys, if we have the money, for sure, but I don't think that Chung Mong-gyu and HTC Group are going to shell out the money that's required for these guys to come to South Korea. I would like him to. I just don't think it's going to happen. My one option that I would look at is the ex-manager of Switzerland, Vladimir Petkovic, who was at the helm of the Swiss team for a very long time. And I think Switzerland is also kind of a small country with a few world-class players that needed a steady hand, and he gave them that steady hand and led them to a lot of success, making it to the knockout rounds of virtually pretty much every tournament that he managed in, knocking off the mighty France at the 2020 Euros. And coached an excellent game then. I think he would be an interesting hire if he was interested. My partner Jason has always talked about Ryan Mason, the current assistant for Ange Postecoglou at Tottenham Hotspur. Not a lot of experience managing a first flight team, let alone a national team, but I mean, another interesting out of the box name. I just don't think we should expect the KFA to be too creative, considering that the guy they hired was Jurgen Klinsmann. But who knows? We could be wrong, because I believe that Chung Mong-gyu said in his press conference today that he would appoint someone to lead a committee that will search for the next coach. So if he puts the right person in charge, maybe that person will get creative and pick the right manager to lead this team. Going back to the 2018 cycle after we had that disastrous World Cup in Russia, Chung Mong-gyu did do the right thing and hire Kim Pang-gon to run the committee to pick the next national coach. Chung Mong-gyu picking Hong Myung-bo, and then Hong Myung-bo picking Kim Pang-gon to find the right coach. And then Kim Pang-gon eventually landed on Paulo Bento, who at the time, his career wasn't in a good place. He had just been sacked in China. But I think that Kim Pang-gon was very meticulous and thorough in the hiring process, and he wanted to get a coach who wasn't just a professional, but really cared about the development of football in South Korea and loved the country enough to the point where he's saying, like, listen, I'm going to invest 4 years here at least, and I'm going to do whatever it takes for us to succeed. And, Paulo Bento did that. He lived in Korea. He was dedicated to the job. He was very professional. You guys should check out my interview with his assistant manager, Sergio Costa. Mr. Bento and Mr. Costa were excellent servants for South Korea. Whatever you guys may think of some of their tactics or player selections, it was still much better than what we had with Jurgen Klinsmann and his current staff. So the hope here, guys, is that Chung Mong-gyu appoints someone to this committee that will be able to find the right manager for us. And I'm also curious to hear what you guys think about potential managers. But for now, looking ahead, guys, we have our next games in March against Thailand. It's coming up pretty quickly. It's still over a month away, but the process to hire a coach hopefully winds down by then. I think it would be nice to have a full time manager appointed by then. I know it doesn't give that manager a lot of time to prepare, but I think the sooner the better. If you appoint an interim and then you keep dragging your feet, and the interim's not very good, there's still going to be calls for some people to make the interim the permanent manager. That's what happened in England with Gareth Southgate. He took the job because no one could do it at the time. And eventually the FA looked around and said, you know what? These results are decent enough. Why not just give him the top job? And look what's happened with England. Yeah, they've made it deep in major competitions, but they still haven't won a trophy, which they should with that golden generation of players. Guys, thanks again so much for watching. Don't forget to smash that like and subscribe button. We got a lot more content coming up. Like I said, we'll analyze the upcoming Euros and the Copa America. Also have some more collaborations, hopefully one with Moondog coming up as well. And I'm sure Jason and I will do another video together to discuss the firing of Jurgen Klinsmann, but also discussing, potential replacements for Klinsmann. And we'll also, once this new coach is hired, we'll definitely run a pod to discuss and analyze that. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.